Alright, so today we're going to be starting one of my biggest resin projects, and my uncle is here. This is actually a coffee table for his house on Vancouver Island. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what kind of wood we have?
Okay, here we have a big slab of red oak. This was a tree that was salvaged from the Oakland County Country Club, sliced into pieces. We picked it up and now we're going to trim it down so that we can make it into a table with an acrylic river running through it.
So we've pretty much gone ahead and figured out where we want to cut this and the rough dimensions of what the finished product's going to be. So we'll go ahead and get the track saw all set up and start cutting.
We'll see what the heck happens.
So I've seen a lot of debate on the internet as far as sealing versus not sealing the wood before doing a pour. And some people say if you use something like a sanding sealer, the resin has a tendency not to bond to it as well. But on the other hand, a lot of people say if you don't seal the wood, then you're going to get some air coming out. So I think what we're going to do today is seal the top of this with sanding sealer. And the reason I want to do this is red oak, which is fairly porous. I don't want any of the resin that gets on top of this to seep in, since it is going to have black dye in it. I don't want that black dye to get into the wood. So we're going to do the top of it to prevent that from happening. But we're going to keep the inside of this where the river is going to go. That's going to be natural. And my thought process behind this is I kind of want the resin to seep into the wood. It's going to adhere better, which is going to give us more overall strength. I'm not really worried about bubbles coming out. I've used Alumilte deep pour before and it's a very slow cure. If we do get any bubbles, this is going to be a black river that's not see-through. So most of the bubbles, if we do get them, are probably going to be within the river and we won't actually see them. Anything that does manage to come to the surface, we can just use a little bit of black Star Bond and you probably won't be able to tell. So we'll go ahead and get the top of this painted up with sanding sealer and then we'll let that dry real good. Maybe just one more. Do that. Well, the way it's stir first. I don't let it clear. put it right in the middle. Hold it in the center again. Huh?
Does seem to be running downhill.
Dump the rest in.
Didn't quite. The black stuff in the butter soap stove. The contour is incredible stuff.
So we had just a slight little issue where the level dropped along this edge. I went ahead and just mixed up a little more resin and did an overpour. It kind of flowed this way, which I'm not too worried about. This went down about 1/4 of an inch, but I think once this is all planed or sanded or whatever, most of this resin that's overpoured, that's all going to disappear. It'll just be this little line right here. And if you look at this side, I think I'm not too worried about any witness lines, because over here you can see most of our silver resin, where it kind of swirls, came away from that edge. So I think this will actually give this side a similar look and shouldn't really have any witness lines. So we'll go ahead and start breaking down this mold and try and get this table out. Alright, so we've got this homemade router sled setup kind of thing built up, and we're going to go ahead and just do some real light passes here and try and skim the top and get everything nice and even and get the resin off the wood. So we'll see how this goes. So we finished router sledding this, and it did a pretty good job taking a lot of mass off. We did have a little bit of warp in the wood and kind of some low spots in the resin, as well as where it kind of bled through on the backside. So I'd say we probably took 1/4 inch off the top and maybe 1/4 inch off the back. And our setup, it did work pretty good, but we do have some kind of small little ridges here, just depending on like how hard you pushed on the router and if there's any flex in our setup. So now we're going to go ahead and get set up and just run this down with the belt sander. I've got a 36 grit belt on. We'll just knock down these edges, and I think I have a 120 grit belt as well, so we'll move to that, and then we'll move on to hitting everything with the orbital and getting this top finished. So I've gone ahead and sanded this down to 1000 grit and cleaned it up with some denatured alcohol. So now we're going to go ahead and put some sanding sealer on it. You can already feel some of the grain is kind of popping up on the grain lines here. So I think this sanding sealer is going to kind of raise that up and harden it, and then we're going to have to come through and sand this again. And I'm going to try really hard to keep this off of the resin itself so we don't end up with any brush lines, because this does not absorb into the resin and it's kind of hard to sand out of there. So if we get a little bit on the edge, we'll try and sand that out, but for the most part we'll keep it off there, and we won't really see what's going on in the resin until we actually get a finish coat on there, which we're going to spray on. So we've got our track all set up for our track saw, and we're just gonna skim the edge of this and get the that little resin edge off, and then we'll go ahead and square up the two ends and then do the other side. So we'll get to cutting. Alright, so we've got our table brought up into the garage, which is where we're going to spray it, and we are going to be using a 2-part automotive clear coat. This is something I had left over from a motorcycle. So this is Custom Shops 2K urethane, 2-part, it's 4-to-1. So I'm going to go ahead and get the table all tack clothed up, and then we'll get the paint gun set and get this mixed up and ready to spray. Alright, so I just finished fabricating the frame for this, and what I ended up doing is building this in 2 halves, and then they bolt together here in the center. My uncle needed this frame to be able to kind of come apart so it could fit in the car, because he is going to be driving this table from Michigan to Vancouver Island. So that's kind of the design I went with, so I could still keep a lot of structure. This is angle iron and then some square stock and then just flat bar on the bottom. So like I said, this is all fabricated up now. I'm going to go ahead and finish getting it cleaned up and we'll get this primed and painted. So here it is all finished up. Unfortunately it's been kind of rainy here, so I can't get a really good naturally lit shot, but you can see there is some very subtle swirls going through it, which that's what my aunt wanted. But I think this is really subtle and it gives it just enough to kind of break up the black, so I'm pretty sure they'll be happy with that. The grain on this is just awesome. Lots and lots of figure. Especially over here on this corner. So yeah, I am really happy with how this turned out, this being my biggest pour, and trying some new techniques like the router sled and such a big mold. So really happy with this. Now it just needs to go to Vancouver, and I'm sure my aunt and uncle are going to be more than happy with this.